She was making $14 an hour. He controlled half the development contracts in the city. When he stood up from the conference room table and pointed his finger 2 inches from her face and told her she had no idea who she was dealing with, every single person in that boardroom went silent, because they all knew exactly who he was. But she didn't. Not really. Not yet. And when she set down her folder, looked at him without blinking, and said those 8 words that nobody in that building had ever said to his face, the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. What happened after that took 4 months to unfold, and nobody who was there that afternoon ever forgot the day the building manager made the most powerful developer in Calgary go completely, utterly quiet. The Meridian Tower on Center Street South was not a glamorous place to work. The lobby had marble floors from a 2009 renovation that was starting to show their age. 2 of the 6 elevators were perpetually under maintenance, and the HVAC system made a sound on cold mornings that one of the engineers described as a diesel truck trying to learn French. The building housed 14 floors of law firms, financial consultancy, and one mid-sized insurance company that had been threatening to move to the East Village for 3 years and never did. Juniper Walsh had worked there for 2 years, 7 months and 22 days as the building's senior property coordinator. She knew this not out of nostalgia, but because she had been tracking it on a sticky note inside her desk drawer, a countdown to the 3-year mark when her employment contract would convert from contract to permanent, and she would finally qualify for the company's dental plan. Her molars had been telling her this mattered since February. She was 31 years old, 5'6", with light brown hair she kept in a low ponytail during site walks because hard hats ruined anything more ambitious. She had a degree in facilities management from SAIT that she had finished in night school while working days at a hotel on MacLeod Trail. Her younger brother Kieran Walsh, her younger brother, 23 years old, and newly diagnosed with type 1 diabetes the previous spring in a way that had blindsided their entire family because he'd been healthy his whole life, and then 1 week in April he wasn't. The insulin and continuous glucose monitor supplies ran to just under $800 a month after provincial coverage. Her rent on the 1-bedroom in Beltline was $1,140. Her car payment, a 7-year-old Civic she'd bought used, was $312. She had stopped buying lunch out. She made sandwiches on Sunday nights for the whole week and kept them in the small fridge in the break room, and told her co-worker Preeti that she preferred homemade because it was healthier, and Preeti, who was perceptive and kind, did not push back. But she smiled when tenants complained about the elevators. She smiled when the insurance company on the 9th floor called for the 4th time in a month about a water stain on their ceiling, and showed no signs of structural concern. She smiled because her supervisor, a steady man named Gerald Park, had told her on her first week that property management was 90% relationship and 10% everything else. She believed him. Most days. On the afternoon of November 7th, a Wednesday which was typically her longest day because she handled the weekly contractor walkthroughs in the morning and the tenant services reports in the afternoon, Juniper was already in hour 9 of what would turn out to be an 11-hour day. She had been covering for her colleague Preeti. She didn't mind. She needed the overtime hours on the timesheet. At 2:47 in the afternoon, 3 black SUVs pulled into the underground parkade with the kind of coordinated entry that suggested either a security detail or a very well-organized sports team. Juniper watched on the parkade camera from her desk and felt something in her chest go slightly still. Gerald appeared in the doorway of her office. His jacket, which he normally hung on the back of his chair at noon and didn't put back on until a meeting was on. Buttoned. "The Hargrove Group is here," he said. Juniper looked up from her report. "They're not scheduled until Thursday, they moved it." Gerald's voice had a particular quality she recognized, the quality that meant the subject was not open for discussion, and also that he was genuinely concerned. "They want to see the 14th floor space. Take them through it. Gerald, I have the Pinnacle Insurance walkthrough at 3:15. Rebook it." She looked at his face. She rebooked it. The men who came in first were large and quiet, and wore the kind of dark clothing that was too formal for a construction site visit and too casual for court. They checked the lobby exits with an unhurried efficiency that looked almost like boredom, which Juniper recognized as the opposite of boredom. Then the elevator opened and Broderick Hargrove walked into the lobby. He was in his mid-50s, broad-shouldered, with silver hair cut close, and the kind of face that had probably been handsome at 40, and had settled into something more formidable now. He wore a charcoal overcoat, no scarf despite the November cold, and a watch that Juniper would later learn cost more than her annual salary. He was accompanied by a woman in her late 30s with a tablet, who Juniper would come to know as his legal advisor, and a younger man, his son she would learn, who had the look of someone trained to appear relaxed. Broderick Hargrove did not look at Juniper when she introduced herself. He was already walking toward the elevators, speaking to the younger man in a low voice. She followed. On the 14th floor, which had been vacant since the previous spring when a tech startup had dissolved and left behind 47 ergonomic chairs and a foosball table that Gerald had not yet figured out how to remove, Juniper walked them through the space with the professional calm she had practiced for years. Square footage, HVAC upgrades, window ratings, the building's seismic assessment, which was current. The timeline for the lobby renovation they had budgeted for in Q2 of next year. Hargrove moved through the space without acknowledgement. He pointed at things and his son made notes. The legal advisor asked 2 sharp questions about the HVAC specification that Juniper answered correctly. Then Hargrove stopped in front of the south-facing windows and said, without turning around, the ceiling height was listed as 10 feet in the package. This is 9'6". Juniper had measured the ceiling herself. Twice. Mr. Hargrove, the specification document lists 9 feet 10 inches. The industry rounding to 10 feet is standard in commercial listings, and the full ceiling heights are included in the technical annex on page. Are you correcting me? It was not phrased as a question. Juniper paused. I'm providing the documentation. I've been in this industry for 30 years. He turned from the window then. His eyes were grey-blue and had the quality of someone who had enclosed a very large number of deals by making the other side want to agree before they'd fully considered what they were agreeing to. I know what a 10-foot ceiling looks like. This is not it. You're right that it isn't, Juniper said, because it's 9'10", which is what the document says. The younger man looked at the floor. The legal advisor's expression shifted by a fraction. Hargrove walked toward her then, and he was not a small man, and the space between them became something with weight to it. He stopped close enough that the 2 security staff near the elevator entrance both straightened slightly without moving. He pointed at her. I don't know what building manager they sent to run this walkthrough, he said, and his voice had risen now, not dramatically, not with heat, but with a particular cold precision. But I have been in conversations about this acquisition for 6 months, and I did not come here today to be nitpicked by someone who is reading from a sheet of paper I have already read. The room went entirely still. Juniper Walsh had been on her feet for 9 hours. She had eaten half a sandwich at her desk at noon because the other half had been sad by that point. Her brother had texted her that morning to say the new CGM sensor had a calibration error and he'd had a scary low at 2 a.m., and she had spent 30 minutes on the phone with the supplier's customer service line before 8 a.m. She had rebooked a tenant appointment she had already rescheduled once. She had been professional and correct, and had the documentation in her hand to prove it. Something in her, very specifically the part that had been tired for a long time before it was ever tired of him, reached a limit that she had not known was there until she arrived at it. She didn't step back. Point that at someone else, she said, and her voice was entirely level. Or this walkthrough is over. Broderick Hargrove stared at her. In 30 years, in boardrooms across Western Canada, in meetings with regulators and rival developers and city council members who had plenty of reasons to push back and chose not to, no one had said anything like that to him. Not in that tone. Not with that absolute, unhurried stillness. His jaw moved. His son, whose name was Elliot, had stopped writing. And then something happened in Hargrove's face that Juniper almost missed because she was working very hard not to let her hands shake. Something shifted. Not softening, not retreat, but a kind of recalibration. The way a very precise instrument adjusts when the reading surprises it. One of the security staff had taken a half step forward. Hargrove raised a hand, barely, without looking at them. The man stopped. The silence went on. Then Hargrove looked at the ceiling. The actual ceiling. He looked at it for a long moment. Get me the full technical annex, he said. His voice was different. The temperature had left it. Juniper reached into her folder and produced the document, which she had brought specifically because she had learned in this job that documentation saved everyone time, and handed it to him. He took it without looking at her again. He walked to the window with it. Juniper turned and walked to the elevator at the measured pace of someone who was absolutely not going to let her hands shake in front of a room full of people. In the elevator, alone, going down, she pressed the back of her hand against the elevator wall, which was cold, and breathed twice, slowly. Gerald was waiting when she came back to the property office. He looked at her the way someone looks when they've been watching a situation develop from a safe distance and are not certain how to categorize what they've seen. How'd it go? He said. Fine. Elliot Hargrove called down while you were on the elevator. Gerald paused. He said his father wants the full disclosure package sent by end of day. Juniper sat down at her desk. I'll send it. Gerald looked at her for another moment. Juniper, do you know who Broderick Hargrove is? A difficult client, she said. Gerald sat down across from her. He's not a client yet. And if we want him to become one, he was wrong about the ceiling height, Gerald. I gave him the document. Gerald was quiet for a moment. Then send the package. She sent it. What followed over the next 10 days was something Juniper had no reference point for, because nothing in her professional experience had prepared her for the way power moves when it decides to pay attention to you. It wasn't pressure, exactly. It was more like the air in the building changed frequency. A member of the Hargrove Group's real estate team, a man named Patterson, no first name offered, began appearing at Meridian Tower every other day for unscheduled walkthroughs of the 14th floor. He was unfailingly courteous. He asked detailed questions that Juniper answered correctly. He tipped nothing in either direction about what the group's intentions were. Gerald told her that Hargrove Group's legal advisor had called to request Juniper's professional credentials and employment history. Why? She said. Gerald looked at her with the expression of someone who was beginning to form a theory they hadn't confirmed yet. She didn't say, was not the kind of person who panicked. She was the kind of person who opened a new spreadsheet tab. She sat in her apartment in Beltline that evening with a can of soup she didn't heat up because she forgot, and she listed what she knew. A powerful man had been wrong, and she had told him so. He had requested her documentation and her credentials. Someone was circling the building without clear motive. She wrote at the bottom of the tab, "Is this about the space or about something else?" She stared at the question, then wrote below it, "Why would those be different things?" She closed the laptop and watched 30 minutes of the cooking competition she kept on in the background as noise, and fell asleep on the couch. 3 weeks after the walkthrough, at 8:15 on a Tuesday morning, before Juniper had finished her first coffee, she looked up from her desk to find Broderick Hargrove standing in her office doorway, without the security team, without Elliot, without the legal advisor, in a dark coat, collar up, like someone who had walked in from the street rather than arrived in a prepared motorcade. "You're here early," he said. Juniper set down her coffee. "I have a contractor at 8:30. He looked at the office. It was a functional space. A standing desk she never stood at, 2 chairs across from it, a wall of binders organized by building system, and a whiteboard with a 3-week maintenance schedule written in 3 different colors of marker because color-coding it had been a decision she still believed in. "Can I sit down?" he said. It wasn't quite a question. "I have 9 minutes before the contractor," she said. He sat. For a moment, neither of them said anything, which was strange because Broderick Hargrove did not look like a man who was comfortable with silence he hadn't manufactured. "I was wrong about the ceiling height," he said. Juniper waited. The document was clear. "I misread the spec." He said this the way someone states a fact about weather. Not with apology exactly, but with the particular precision of someone who has decided that accuracy matters more than ego on this specific point. "I shouldn't have spoken to you the way I did." "No," Juniper said. "You shouldn't have." Something moved through his expression. "You're not going to accept that gracefully and move us along." "I don't know you well enough to be graceful about it," she said. "But I accept it." He looked at the whiteboard. "What do the colors mean?" She told him. Preventive maintenance in blue, reactive in red, capital projects in green. He looked at it for a moment longer than she expected. "My people tell me the building's systems are well managed," he said. "Better than the last 2 acquisition assessments we ran. Gerald Park has been running this building for 12 years. Gerald Park wasn't in the room on the 14th floor." Juniper looked at him. "Is there something you're asking me, Mr. Hargrove?" He looked at her then with the full attention of someone who did not divide it. "I'm telling you that I know what well-managed looks like, and I know what the person running it looks like, and I'd like to have a conversation about what you want. Right now I want to meet my contractor at 8:30. He stood. "Tomorrow then, I'll be in the building." He left. Juniper sat at her desk for a moment, then finished her coffee, which had gone cold, and went to meet the contractor, who was early and cheerful and had questions about the east stairwell that she answered without incident. What happened over the weeks that followed was not what she had expected, which was mostly because she hadn't let herself form expectations. They talked, in her office, once in the small cafe on the lobby level, once in the parkade standing beside his car while it started raining, and neither of them moved to get out of it, which Juniper would think about later as the moment the dynamic became something harder to categorize. He asked questions that were operational at first, and gradually became less so. She answered the ones she could and said, "I'm not sure that's mine to answer," about the ones she couldn't, which happened twice. And both times he accepted it without pushing, which surprised her. She learned that the Hargrove Group's acquisition of Meridian Tower was part of a larger repositioning of their downtown Calgary portfolio, that 3 of their existing properties had underperformed in the past 2 years because of exactly the kind of deferred maintenance issues that Meridian didn't have, and that Broderick had been in this business long enough to know that the buildings that held their value were the ones with people inside them who gave a damn about the systems. She learned that he had a daughter named Avery, 19, in her first year at U of A in Edmonton. He mentioned this once, briefly in the context of nothing particular, which was how she knew it was important. She did not ask about it. She filed it. Preeti, who had returned from her sick leave and had a gift for reading rooms, watched Juniper come back from one of the lobby cafe conversations and said nothing for 45 seconds, which was long for Preeti. "What?" said Juniper. "Nothing," said Preeti. "I'm just noting information. Note something else." Preeti noted something else, but her expression stayed as it was. It was Juniper's brother who eventually named what was happening, not because he was perceptive in the ways adults are perceptive, but because he was 23 and had the directness of someone still close enough to childhood to ask obvious questions. He called her on a Thursday evening, checking in the way they checked in since April, which was more often and less casually than before. "You sound different," he said. "I'm tired. Different from tired. Thinking different." She didn't answer immediately. "Junie," he said, using the name that only he used, the one from when he was small and couldn't get the whole word out. "What's happening?" "Something complicated," she said. "Good complicated or bad complicated?" She looked out the window at the Beltline in December, the lights just starting to feel like the season. "I genuinely don't know yet." He was quiet for a moment. "Is it the guy from the building?" She had not mentioned the guy from the building. "How?" she started. "You mentioned a walkthrough 3 weeks ago in a way you never mention walkthroughs," he said, "and I'm your brother." She was quiet. "Just be careful," he said. Then, "But also don't not do things because you're scared. Those are 2 different things." "When did you get wise?" she said. "I've been wise for years. You're only noticing." The morning it broke open was a Saturday, which she was not working, and which made it worse in the way that unexpected things are worse when they arrive on days that were supposed to be ordinary. She was at the Safeway on 17th, buying her brother's favorite kind of crackers because he was coming for dinner, when a woman stepped around the end of the aisle and stopped in front of her. She was in her early 50s, precisely dressed, with the posture of someone who had never once in her life slouched. Her hair was dark with copper running through it, and she wore it to her collarbone. Her expression was controlled and courteous in a way that was specific, the way people look when they've decided how a conversation will go before it starts and are simply being fair about it. "You're Juniper Walsh," she said. Juniper shifted the basket to her other hand. "Yes, my name is Diane Hargrove." A beat. "His ex-wife," the woman said, reading the question before Juniper asked it. "We share 2 adult children and the mortgage on a ski property in Fernie that neither of us uses. I want to be clear that I'm not here to play a role in anything dramatic." Juniper waited. Diane looked at her with the measured attention of someone who had made a career of assessing what things were actually worth. "Are you aware," she said, "that the Hargrove Group is currently under review by the Alberta Securities Commission?" Juniper said nothing. "There was a partnership dissolution 4 years ago involving a mixed-use development in Okotoks," Diane said. "The other partners are alleging misrepresentation in the original financing structure. The matter is still in process. It has not been resolved. It has been in the news once, in a trade publication, where it was described carefully." She said this last part the way you describe something when lawyers have seen the draft. "Why are you telling me this?" Juniper said. Diane was quiet for a moment. "Because he is, in his way, genuine, and because he will make you feel like you are the first person to have seen him clearly in years." She paused. "That feeling will be real. I'm not telling you it won't be. I'm telling you to go in with your eyes open, which is something nobody did for me." She looked at Juniper steadily. "I found out from a document I wasn't supposed to be near, 18 months after I was already in. I've spent the 4 years since wishing someone had been standing in a grocery store aisle, telling me what I could have known earlier." She picked up a box of green tea from the shelf beside her, which she had apparently needed, and walked away. Juniper stood in the cracker aisle of a Safeway in Calgary on a Saturday morning in December, and felt the particular sensation of something that had been theoretical becoming weight she could feel in her hands. She bought the crackers. She drove home. She put the bags on the counter and stood there for a moment without unpacking them. She did not call him that night. She made dinner for her brother, who arrived at 6 with a glucose reading that was good and the specific cheerfulness of someone who had been having a run of good days and knew better than to take them for granted. She made pasta. She let him pick what they watched. She did not tell him about the grocery store. Later, after he had gone home and she had washed the dishes and stood at the kitchen window longer than she needed to, she opened her laptop. She searched the ASC records. She found the trade publication article. It was carefully written, the way things are carefully written when the exact truth is still being established in a formal process. She found the company registration for Hargrove Group's subsidiary that had been party to the Okotoks partnership. She found a profile of Broderick from a business journal 3 years ago, in which he was quoted discussing Calgary's development landscape with the particular confidence of someone who had never seriously considered that his analysis might be wrong. She found a photograph from a hospital gala fundraiser. Broderick in a tux, shaking hands with people who were also in tuxes, wearing the smile that people at hospital galas wear, which is not an insincere smile, but is also not a private one. She thought about Avery, 19, in Edmonton. She thought about Diane in the cracker aisle, telling the truth she wished someone had told her. She thought about her brother's voice. Don't not do things because you're scared. Those are two different things. She thought about the parkade in the rain. She thought about how he had looked at the maintenance whiteboard with genuine attention and asked what the colors meant, which was such a small thing and had meant, she realized now, more to her than it should have. At 11:20, she called him. He answered in 2 rings. "Juniper, I need to tell you something," she said. "All right, I met Diane today." A silence. Brief, controlled, but not manufactured, the silence of someone processing rather than composing. "She told me about Okotoks," Juniper said, "the ASC review." The silence this time was longer. "She had no right," Juniper said. "She was protecting herself, and, in her way, protecting me." She paused. "I'm not angry that she told me. I'm calling because I want to ask you directly, and I want you to answer the same way you've been answering my maintenance questions, which is accurately. Is it true?" A long pause. "Some of it," he said. "Can you be specific, not on the phone? Then tomorrow." "Juniper, tomorrow," she said. "Or not at all." He came the next morning. Not to the tower. She had suggested the path along the Bow River near Prince's Island Park, public, ordinary, and hers in the sense that she had walked it 200 times and knew which benches caught the sun. He arrived without anyone else, which she suspected was uncommon. He was wearing a coat she hadn't seen before, dark wool, and he looked, in the flat December light, like a man who had been very large his entire life and was feeling the weight of it in a different way than usual. She sat on the bench. He sat beside her. He told her not everything. He said this clearly, that there were things that were part of a legal process and things that were genuinely not his to say yet. She believed him about the legal process part. She was less certain about the rest, and she told him so, and he accepted that without argument. What he did tell her: the Okotoks partnership had involved financing representations that he stood behind and that his partner had interpreted differently, and the difference mattered enough that the other side had escalated to the regulator. His legal team believed the review would conclude without formal findings. The other side's legal team was not currently making it feel that simple. "What does your counsel actually think?" Juniper said. He looked at the river. "That the exposure is manageable. Is that what you think?" "I think the original structure was defensible, and that I should have made the partner sign a clarifying addendum before the close, and that not doing so was a decision I made in a hurry for reasons that felt good at the time." He paused. "I think I am very good at moving fast and occasionally bad at the consequences of it." Juniper looked at the river too. A bird she couldn't name landed on the railing across the path and regarded them without concern. "Why are you telling me all of this?" she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Because I've spent 30 years in rooms where the standard response to that question is to tell people the version that lands best." He paused. "I don't want to do that with you. I've been trying to figure out why, and the answer I keep arriving at is that you walked into a room at 9 hours into a shift with documentation in your hand and told me I was wrong, and you were right, and you didn't flinch. And I have been in this industry for 3 decades, and the number of people who have done that is," he considered, "not a long list." A gust moved off the river, cold. "Real. I'm not in a position to be involved with someone whose decisions create exposure for me professionally," Juniper said. "Gerald's already watched you show up at the tower 3 times without an appointment. I can't be that person, I know, and I'm not made for the world you're in. I manage building systems. I have a spreadsheet for deferred maintenance. I am not equipped to navigate a regulatory review and whatever comes after it. I know," he said again. "So then why?" He looked at the bird which had not moved. "Because you told me about the colors on the whiteboard. Because you answered every question I asked with the exact right amount of detail and then stopped talking, which is something I have been trying to teach people for 20 years and you just do naturally." He paused. "And because you said not at all on the phone last night and meant it, and I'm not used to people meaning it." Juniper Walsh sat on a bench along the Bow River in December and felt the very particular sensation of standing at a fork where both paths were genuinely real, and neither one was safe and nobody was going to make the decision for her. "I'll think about dinner," she said. It was not a yes. He understood it was not a no. She stood up. He stood. "The 14th floor," she said. "Your team sends a formal letter of intent or you lose the space. Gerald needs the certainty." "It goes out Monday," he said. "Good." She pulled her coat closer. "I'm going back to work." She walked back along the river path and did not look back, and made it 300 meters before she allowed herself to smile, briefly, at the cold air, and then stopped smiling and went back to being a person who had things to do. She said yes to dinner 2 weeks later. She told her brother she had a professional meeting. She told Preeti nothing, because Preeti would have asked questions that were too good. She texted Diane Hargrove. She had found the number easily enough, and Diane had apparently expected this, because she responded within 4 minutes and said only, "Thank you for the grocery store." Diane responded, "Make them tell you the truth before you need it," which was, Juniper thought, the best possible advice. The restaurant was in Inglewood, the kind of place that was warm and not very large and had blackboard specials and wine that was good, but not performative. He was already there. He stood when she came in, which was the kind of detail that she noticed and didn't mention. They talked for 3 hours. She ate the duck, which was remarkable, and drank 1 glass of wine, slowly, and when he refilled his water glass himself because the server was busy, she noticed that too. She told him about her brother. She hadn't planned to. It came out in the middle of talking about why she'd gone back to school at 26, and once it was out, she went further than she'd meant to. The diagnosis, the April that had rearranged her understanding of permanent, the cost of the supplies, the way she organized her budget around a line item that hadn't existed 2 years before. He listened without offering anything. She noticed this specifically because people usually started solving problems around the second mention of a number. When she finished, he said, "How's he doing now? Good days and hard days," she said. "Mostly he manages it better than I manage my worry about it." "That's usually how it goes," he said. "The person in it adapts. The person watching never quite does." She looked at him. "My daughter had a health scare 2 years ago," he said. "Nothing chronic. She was fine. But there was a week where we didn't know that, and I learned very precisely how little I could do about anything regardless of how many resources I had." He paused. It was clarifying. "In the way that only things that frighten you properly can be, did it change how you make decisions?" she asked. He considered this honestly, which she appreciated. "It changed what I notice. Whether it's changed how I decide." He stopped. "Ask me in another year." She laughed, genuinely, the short unexpected kind, and he looked at her with an expression she hadn't seen before. Not the sharp attention of the 14th floor, not the controlled assessment of the walkthroughs. Something that was not quite unguarded but was close to it, like a window cracked open for the first time in a long time. She texted her brother at 10:58. "Still here, all fine." He sent back a thumbs up and then immediately, "Details tomorrow." She sent back a single period, which meant yes, and put her phone face down. In the back of the car home, he had arranged a car and she had not argued because it was late and 17 outside. She thought about what she was doing. She did not arrive at certainty. She arrived at something more honest, which was that she was a person who had spent 2 years tracking a countdown to dental benefits on a sticky note in her desk drawer, and that she had worked very hard for a very long time, and had been correct about the ceiling height, and that a man with a 30-year career had come back to apologize, not because he had to, but because he believed accuracy mattered more than ego on that specific point, which was not nothing. The ASC review concluded in March with no formal findings. The determination was published in a brief regulatory notice that the trade publication covered in 2 paragraphs. Broderick's legal team characterized it as a vindication of the original financing structure. The other partners' counsel characterized it as a technical determination that resolved only the regulatory question. Both statements were accurate in different ways, which was true of most things. Juniper read the notice on her lunch break. She called her brother, not about the notice, but because she called him on Tuesdays, and he was having a good week, and his CGM readings were stable, and he had met someone at his study group who he described as interesting, possibly more interesting than study groups usually produce. She congratulated him with the specific warmth of a sister who is relieved and happy and still worrying slightly less than she used to. She did not move to a different city. The plan she had spent 2 years building had been about escaping something. At some point, it had quietly become about building towards something instead, and she had not noticed the transition exactly but found herself on the other side of it. She still made her sandwiches on Sunday evenings, not because she couldn't afford lunch out anymore. There had been a salary conversation with Gerald in January that had been overdue, and the outcome had been favorable. But because Sunday evenings in the kitchen were a kind of quiet she had come to protect, the routine of it, the competence of doing something ordinary well. She thought sometimes about the 14th floor, about the moment she had said those 8 words. Point that at someone else or this walkthrough is over. And the silence afterward, the total held-breath stillness of a room full of people who had not expected it. She had meant it as a professional boundary. A line. She had not known it would become the beginning of something that would rearrange the year. That, she had come to understand, was what lines actually were. Not endings. Not walls. Just the place where you finally find out what you're made of, and what, if anything, decides to find out with you. She had been a building coordinator earning $14 an hour, with a brother to look out for, and a dental plan she was still 3 months away from. She had been correct about the ceiling height. She had not backed down when she should have, depending on who you asked, and she had not backed down when it might have been easier to. And both of those things were true, and she intended to keep them that way. He had been a man who moved fast and occasionally paid for it, who had looked at a maintenance whiteboard with genuine curiosity and asked what the colors meant, and who had come back, without a motorcade, to say he'd been wrong. Neither of them had been looking for what happened next. The best things rarely show up announced.